Thanks to our friends at The Motley Fool for sponsoring this video. Visit fool.com/Riiv to receive the top 10 stocks to buy right now. One of my favorite stocks today is General Motors. The company is trading at an extreme value on the market right now, and there is a reason to believe this could be one of the dominant companies in autonomous driving long term. So in this video, I want to cover the value in General Motors stock just based on the operations that it has today, and then talk a little bit about why I'm so bullish on the company's autonomous driving unit, Cruise. I'm Travis Hoium. Thank you for watching Riiv Investing. Please subscribe here on YouTube so you can get all of my content when you turn those notifications on. Let's start with a really high-level look at General Motors stock. You can see here that as I'm recording on February 15th, the company has a market cap of about $60 billion and a price-to-earnings multiple of 7. So this is a very cheap stock based on almost any metric that you want to look at. The question is why? And that really goes back to the auto business in general. Investors don't have a lot of confidence that auto earnings will be sustaining long term. And this is something that goes back over 100 years to the early days of Ford. That's a company that we still identify with today in the auto industry, but it's almost gone bankrupt multiple times. This is really a boom-bust cycle business, and there's clearly been a boom over the last few years in profitability, which you can see here for calendar year 2022 financial results, but investors don't think that's sustainable long term. So let's look at a few of these numbers. Revenue of $156.7 billion, 3.6 million units sold, and adjusted auto free cash flow of $10.5 billion. I'm going to come back to that number in just a second. On a per share basis, General Motors delivered $7.59 in earnings per share last year. So again, strong increase from the year before. There's still some of those supply chain issues that the auto industry has been dealing with for the last few years, but very, very good results from General Motors. This is a walk through the company's 2022 EBIT adjusted. EBIT is earnings before interest and taxes, and adjusted is just taking out one-time items. So this should be taken with a bit of a grain of salt, but sort of gives you an idea of where the company's earnings are coming from. GM North America, nice increase in earnings over the past year to $13 billion. General Motors International, slight increase to $1.1 billion. General Motors Financial, actually a decline. That's largely a cause of interest rates going up and delinquencies likely to go up. They've increased loan loss reserves there. So $4.1 billion. Cruise lost $1.9 billion. And then corporate costs was $1.8 billion. For the total company, $14.5 billion in EBIT adjusted. The last thing I want to highlight here is free cash flow. So for the full year of 2022, net income was $9.7 billion. Automotive cash flow from operating activities, $19.1 billion. So again, $60 billion company generating $19.1 billion from cash flow from continuing operations for its core auto business. $9 billion was then invested in capital expenditures. So that's a lot of investment in Cruise and then also building out electric vehicles. That's something that General Motors has put a huge focus on in the last couple of years. But in total, adjusted automotive free cash flow, $10.5 billion. Again, the company itself is trading for less than 6 times the core business operating free cash flow. Now, for the full year, management is expecting earnings per share on an adjusted basis to be $6 to $7 per share. So earnings may come down slightly as pricing power moves back towards the customer and away from automakers who have been in a tight supply environment over the last few years. But still, this should be a very profitable business. But that's not actually the reason that I'm excited about General Motors stock. I like that there's a profitable core to build from that's spitting off cash. But the real reason to own General Motors long term is its autonomous driving unit, Cruise. If you've not heard about Cruise, this is an autonomous ride-sharing company. That means they make a fully autonomous vehicle. No driver. This is not a driving assist program. There's literally no steering wheel in their newest vehicles. And the ride-sharing service is a bit like Uber or Lyft, but without a driver. There's purpose-built vehicles that they're now testing in the San Francisco area where their headquarters is located. And they actually have commercial operations with retrofitted vehicles in Austin, Phoenix, and San Francisco. Let's look a little bit at what they're building and what the business model is for that business going forward. First of all, this is from General Motors' presentation. You can see here that Cruise autonomous vehicle commercialization is rapidly scaling. There are about 300 vehicles on the road today. In the bottom left, you can see a picture of this vehicle. It's a retrofitted Chevy Bolt with a bunch of equipment on the top. But there are about 1 million miles of fully autonomous driving that has already been done. That's not testing with a safety driver in the vehicle. There's millions more miles like that that have been performed by Cruise. This is actually autonomous driving with no driver in the car at all. So this is a product that has really been in the market for quite a while at this point. This is their next generation vehicle. This is called the Cruise Origin, going to be produced by General Motors and Honda. Basically, what those two companies are doing is using themselves as third-party manufacturers for Cruise. General Motors has actually provided a line of credit for up to $5 billion for the commercialization of these vehicles as well. But this is now being tested in California. A really interesting vehicle here. It's a little bit like a mini bus, and you can see that everything about it is really being built to be a ride-sharing vehicle. Like it shows here, you can fit 4 passengers, and those sliding doors make it easy to get in and get out. There are even increased mobility options for the Origin. You can see here that it's easier to get in with something like a wheelchair. So could be a great mobility option for a lot of people around the world. And then you can also see that Cruise is building the Origin for delivery. There's a mock-up here of some pods to be delivered. So maybe that's something you get from the grocery store or a convenience store, and just walk out to the street and grab those items from your Cruise Origin. This is really the future of General Motors, I think. Cruise could be a potentially disruptive company in transportation, allowing people to not own vehicles, offering a lower cost ride-sharing service than companies like Uber and Lyft, who ultimately have to pay drivers and who don't own their own vehicles. So this is an entirely new business model, and it's maybe further along in its development cycle than you would think. Like I mentioned before, 300 vehicles already on the road, over 1 million miles of fully autonomous driving, and later this year, they're going to launch the Cruise Origin. You might be wondering how big of an opportunity Cruise has in the autonomous vehicle market. To put some context to that, Uber has generated $31.9 billion in revenue over the past year, and Lyft has generated a little over $4 billion in revenue. Now, I think autonomous driving vehicles that are on the road 24 hours a day and can be built to be very efficient for ride sharing could actually be much higher margin than Uber or Lyft are going to generate. And especially think about those cost savings for not having to pay for a driver. This could be a service that is really profitable out of the gates for Cruise. We don't know what the economics look like quite yet because they haven't reached any sort of scale. But long term, I think this is really where General Motors' value is going to come from. And this may be coming faster than you think. If you think about when Uber launched, they launched a specific app in each city, and it was only available for black cars early on. This was not a ride-sharing service at all. It was really for just professional drivers. A decade later, this had become a verb. People were using it all the time to augment their transportation, and it ultimately became a huge delivery business as well. A decade from now, we may see Cruise go through a similar transition. The idea of autonomous vehicles driving around right now might seem a little bit strange and scary, but like I said before, we have millions of miles of testing, mostly in California. We're slowly going to see that expand around the world. Cruise is already operating in 3 cities currently, with plans to launch in more cities later this year. A decade from now, we could see Cruise operating in 50 to 100 cities at scale. I think that could be a really big business and a huge growth driver for General Motors. So with General Motors, the great thing about buying this stock now is you get a value stock in the core auto business, spitting out cash flow. I think that's going to be profitable for the foreseeable future. They're making a huge investment in electric vehicles, in the supply chain that goes into that. I know that a lot of people are worried about disruption from Tesla, but I think that worry is overblown. And this is a company that has figured out how to make vehicles profitably in the modern economy. But the upside potential really comes from Cruise. If that becomes a truly disruptive force in transportation, this could be a multi-$100 billion company. And remember, we're getting about 80% ownership of Cruise through General Motors for only $60 billion. I like the value and the upside. This is why this is one of my favorite stocks right now. What do you think about this? Do you believe in the future of cruise? I'd love to hear your comments in the comment section below. And I'll link to a longer write-up that I did about cruise that goes into why I think this is going to be such a disruptive technology. If you would like to look at that, there'll be more information there. Don't forget to subscribe to Riiv Investing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you here next time.